Lord. No one else was able to wear this attire except the high priest who was consecrated to the Lord. For glory, it means for honor and splendor. Remember what Jesus said. Jesus says, man, I glorified you, Father, and I will glorify you again. Because the point of the high priest was to bring attention to God, not to himself, but to God. And beauty. It means a particular graceful, ornamental, or excellent quality. The high priest had to be an individual of high standards. He was an individual who was representing against Jesus. Now, as we go forth, man, and we study this, we're going to study each piece. And the first piece that we're going to talk about is the mitre. Now, the mitre was very important because on it, the most important piece on the mitre was the particular gold plate that said there, holiness to the Lord. Now, this was to represent very clearly the holiness that the high priest was to have. In 1 Peter 1, 15, 16, the Bible says very clearly, as God is holy, so are his people to be. See, specifically, the high priest was to be very holy unto God. In Philippians 2, 5, 11, why was it placed up here on the mind? Because let the mind of Christ be in you, who, though he was God, thought it not to come forth and to become a servant. The mind is the most holy in our temple. Remember that this is when you look at our own sanctuary, the most holy place in our sanctuary is the mind. And that's why the mitre was very important. It signified the very first thing that people saw when they saw the high priest was holiness unto the Lord. Now, the other part of the furnishings here we're going to talk about is the tunic. Now, interestingly enough, the tunic was something that all the other priests wore. But specifically, the high priest was a special one. Now, when we look at it, it was a one-piece linen. It was white, which signified very clearly the righteousness of Christ. In 1 Corinthians 1:30, the Bible tells us very clearly, unto us Christ is made wisdom, righteousness, redemption, and sanctification, signifying who Jesus is to us. This is his righteousness. Also, it explains very clearly the piece that was one torn. Now, you read in John chapter 19, verses 23 and 24, it talks about when the soldiers, man, had gotten his garments and they wanted to, instead of ripping it, they decided to cast lots. The reason was because it was a one-piece item. That's what this is, the white piece. So you see that very clearly, Jesus always wore the priest, the white tunic. He always wore it throughout his time that he's walked on the face of this earth. In Matthew 3:15, it says very clearly when John the Baptist came forth to ask and Jesus wanted to be baptized, John said, no, I need to be baptized by you. But Jesus specifically told him very clearly, no, we need to fulfill all righteousness. And it explains very clearly that Jesus fulfilled all the righteousness. This is why the tunic is a reflection of Jesus. It's a reflection of his righteousness. It's a reflection, man, of his glory. The other part that we see here is the robe here. Now this specifically, it's not by coincidence that it's blue. When you read, and I'm going to read this in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, 38, 40, so we can see very clearly why blue. What does the blue signify? So in Numbers chapter 15, and we read verses 38 to 40, it says, speak to the children of Israel, tell them to make tassels the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and put a blue thread on the tassels of the corners. And you shall have the tassels that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, that you may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes inclined, and that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy for your Lord. So you see very clearly that the Lord commanded that them put a blue tassel, and it signified for them to remember always the commandments. Blue, when you look at Bible prophecy, blue signifies loyalty, obedience. Now, this is very important, man, because oftentimes, again, we always focus on the fact that Jesus died. We always focus on what he did on the cross. But if it were not for his perfect obedience life, that sacrifice would have no value.